Hello friends, welcome to Java EE Servlet. So in this video we are going to see how to use a deployment descriptor. So in the previous video we created a servlet with the initialization parameter and we saw how we can use the annotation. In this video we will see how one can use a deployment descriptor. So older version of a web module uses deployment descriptors and annotations are introduced in the latter part of the Java EE. So here let us see how a deployment descriptor specifies a servlet as well as initialization parameter. So you will in the deployment descriptor you will see a servlet tag with opening and closing tags. Next you see a name for the servlet. This will be the identifier name for the servlet. So if your web module consists of a multiple servlet, then you will see multiple servlet tag. Then other initialization parameter goes here. So inside the servlet you will see init param that is enclosed within a special tag init-param. So this is how the deployment descriptor look for servlet. Also there will be a separate tag for URL mapping. So if you see, here is the servlet mapping tag that appears in the deployment descriptor. So this is servlet mapping. What it does, it maps our servlet name. So this refers the servlet name which is in the servlet tag. Then URL pattern, so it specifies the URL pattern. So in the annotation we saw a URL pattern, right? So that pattern will be specified here. And so this is how we map the URL pattern with the servlet. Alright, now it is a demo time and we will see this deployment descriptor in action. Now we will open Eclipse Neon. Here if you see, we already have one web module, but that was created in web module 3.1. that's why you doesn't see any deployment descriptor by default. But if you want to use, you can use, and you can remove these annotations and you can use a deployment descriptor. So now I'm not going to touch this project because web module 3.1 prefers using the annotation for servlet. So let's don't break that rule. But what we can do to learn a deployment descriptor, we will create a new dynamic web project and we will choose the older version, say 2.2, and we will create name. So 2.2, right? So just created 22 as the project name. So clicking next here, and if you see, it is not providing the option to turn on or off the deployment descriptor. So I'm clicking finish here. The deployment descriptor is the same as the previous one. So now let us start adding the servlet. So let me open this deployment descriptor so that you can see it gets updated when we add the servlet. So package, I am giving it as and class name, we will give the same class name as we did previously. First servlet. Let me click next. We'll get only do get, and we'll click finish. So if you see here, now we have a new section that get added. So web app ID, then display name is Servlet examples 22, so this one. Then within that you can see a servlet with opening and closing bracket, and the servlet name is the first servlet, and the display name is also same. Then this first servlet is mapping to a class, so that class is from tube.codingexample.servlet 22. So this is our package name, then our class name. Then you see one more tag, servlet mapping, and mapping, if you see servlet name, this is mapping to the or referring the servlet name here in our servlet. If there are multiple servlet, we are defining a URL mapping. First we say for first servlet, this is the mapping URL or URL pattern. Alright, now this will work just like the previous one. If you want to check, let's take src for servlet. We can simply copy paste our do get method. So since we already saw this, I am going a bit fast. Set content type, then get a writer. After that, form a HTML and push it to the browser. Now we will publish our older version of servlet and we will run it. So this time, if you see, our servlet doesn't use any annotation, but it completely depends on deployment descriptor. Now we will run this servlet. Before that, we have to publish. Let me start Wildfly. Next, we will add our new web module. That means the older version of web module. Click finish. So now it is started and synchronized. Now we can run. So if you see, this time I'm running it from Servlet example 22. Run on server. So Servlet example 22 is published, and the 3.1 version of web module is not yet published. Let me click finish, and you can see that it's working fine. Now let's go ahead and add our second servlet. So I'm picking the same package. Init param demo. Next. So we added a parameter also. I'm clicking next. We'll ask for init method. Do post I don't want. Click finish. Now let's look at the deployment descriptor, and if you see, now we have two servlet. So this one is our first servlet and this is our second servlet. In second servlet, it is almost equivalent to the previous one. Servlet name, display name, description, servlet class, and this is what new here. Since we have init param that is enclosed within this init param, and you can see parameter name, person name, and param value Anushilpa, Shilpa. Okay, we can modify. Then if you see, there are two servlet mapping. One is mapping to our first servlet. This is the name of our servlet. Now when you look at this particular servlet name, first servlet, so it will go and search where is the first servlet. This is how it maps. So this is the URL pattern. Go to first servlet, it will go here, then it knows where is the class, implementation class. Similarly for our second init param demo and URL pattern. So if our Wildfly web server encounters this particular URL in the, this pattern in the URL, then first it comes to this servlet mapping and it gets init param demo is the servlet name, it goes there. Then here we have init param demo. Then from here it extracts the information of a implementation class and the parameters, initializing parameters associated to that servlet. Now let's quickly copy paste whatever we implemented previously. So now in our class you don't see this annotation, all are moved to deployment descriptor. So that's the older version, but because of simplicity people are now using the annotations. Alright, first we will have this member. Let me quickly copy paste so that you can see whether it is working or not. So by default here the init param is not calling the base class function. So if it doesn't work, then we will make a call. So this is in do-get. So same code change I just copy pasted. Now what we can do, we have to completely remove this. Republish it is saying, but it is better to remove it completely. So server is started. If you want, you can restart it. So this is kind of perfectly cleaning up all the resources so that we won't see error related to the cached information. So we removed the published var file and we are even restarting the server. Alright, so there is no trace of a previous version of web module. Now we will add our example 22, then we will click finish. So we can see started and synchronized. Now this time we will run our sorry, not this one, our second version of Servlet. So you can see here Servlet example is the previous version which is not published to the running server, but Servlet example 22, that means Servlet 2.2 or web module 2.2 is published. And you can see welcome Shilpa. So that's all here. So you can see this one is without annotation, but using the everything in the Servlet config, I mean the deployment descriptor or web.xml file. And the 3.1 version deployment descriptor exists, but we are not using it. But here we are using everything through annotation. So going forward, we will develop our Servlet example using web module 3.1. That means we will use annotation. So at times we may use deployment descriptor, but most of the time we will use annotation, because that's what the Java requirement specification states. Going forward, the use of deployment descriptor will be minimized and everything will go through annotation. All right, that's all here in this video. So I hope now you have an idea of how the deployment descriptor can be used. And if you see, we no need to add anything. So everything the IDE itself added. And so this understanding is required. Suppose if you want to manually change something inside the deployment descriptor. Suppose, say for example, if you want to change the initializing parameter, so you know what to look. So first you will go to Servlet Mapping, specific URL, you will find a Servlet name, then you will map where is that Servlet name ABC, then you will go to initializing parameter and you will change whatever parameter you want. That's all. Thank you for watching. Bye.